History often feels like a broken record. Wars break out again. Pandemics sweep across the world again. Economies boom, crash, and collapse again. You'd think humanity would learn its lesson by now, but here we are, still stuck in the same patterns. So why does this keep happening? Is history literally repeating itself, or are there deeper forces at play, cycles that keep dragging us back into the same mistakes? In this video, we'll explore the idea of history cycles, look at famous examples, and ask the big question: can humanity ever escape the loop? Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps the channel and lets me bring you more videos like this. When most people think of history, they imagine progress, a straight line forward, from primitive times to today's modern world. But many thinkers throughout history have seen it differently. They believed history isn't a straight line, it's a cycle. The ancient Greek historian Polybius noticed that governments rise and fall in repeating patterns. Monarchies become corrupt, turn into tyrannies, and eventually collapse. Democracies often decay into mob rule. And once the system falls apart, the cycle just starts over with a new leader or a new regime. Fast forward to the 20th century. Philosopher Oswald Spengler argued that entire civilizations act like living organisms. They're born, they grow, they flourish, and eventually they die. He thought the West was already entering its old age. Then there's economist Nikolai Kondratiev, who looked at economics and saw long waves of growth and decline. Every 40 to 60 years, new technologies like steam engines, electricity, cars, or the internet kick off a wave of growth. But after the boom comes stagnation, crisis, and collapse. The takeaway? Whether you look at governments, cultures, or economies, cycles are everywhere. They happen because human nature doesn't really change. We make the same mistakes, we forget the lessons of the past, and we repeat the same patterns, just with different names, different technology, and different faces. Nothing illustrates historical cycles better than war. After World War I, people said, never again. Yet less than 20 years later, the world plunged into World War II, an even bigger and deadlier conflict. Why? Because the underlying problems weren't solved. Germany was humiliated, economies were collapsing, radical ideologies were on the rise. The pattern of resentment, rivalry, and revenge repeated itself, leading straight into another war. Historians call this the Thucydides trap. It's the idea that when one great power rises and threatens to replace another, conflict almost always follows. It happened when Athens challenged Sparta in ancient Greece. It happened when Britain and Germany clashed in the early 20th century. And today, many people see echoes of this cycle in the relationship between the United States and China. Geopolitics works in waves. Periods of stability and cooperation eventually give way to competition and conflict. After every major war, nations designed a new world order. After World War I, it was the Treaty of Versailles. After World War II, it was the Yalta system. After the Cold War, the US shaped a unipolar world. But none of these systems last forever. Within decades, they start to unravel, and the cycle begins again. The scary part is that these patterns are bigger than individual leaders or countries. They're baked into the way nations rise and fall, how power shifts, and how human ambition works. Which raises the uncomfortable question: are we once again on the edge of repeating the cycle? If you think COVID-19 was something completely new, history says otherwise. Pandemics have been hitting humanity in cycles for centuries. Take the Black Death in the 14th century. It wiped out as much as a third of Europe's population. The effects went far beyond health. Entire villages disappeared, the labor market changed overnight, and society was reshaped in ways people couldn't have imagined. Fast forward to 1918. The so-called Spanish flu killed more people than World War I. Masks, quarantines, and closed down public spaces? We've seen it all before. And then came COVID-19. Empty streets, lockdowns, mass panic, conspiracy theories, and at the same time, massive leaps in medical technology. Once again, the cycle repeated. Why does this keep happening? Because we live in a world full of viruses and bacteria, and globalization spreads them faster than ever. But there's another factor: collective amnesia. As soon as a pandemic ends, society moves on. People forget the warnings, governments stop preparing, and decades later, history comes back to remind us. The interesting part is that every pandemic also pushes progress. The Black Death advanced medicine and reshaped economies. The Spanish flu gave birth to stronger public health systems. COVID accelerated vaccine technology and remote work. The crises look the same, but the outcomes push humanity forward, just like a spiral, repeating, but at a higher level. Economic crises are perhaps the most predictable cycle in history. The Great Depression of 1929 began with a stock market crash in the United States and quickly escalated into a global crisis. Unemployment reached 25%, and millions of people lost their homes and savings. Decades later, in 2008, the world went through a remarkably similar crisis. Overheated markets, a housing bubble, the collapse of major banks, and mass layoffs. Once again, governments had to step in, pouring money into the system to keep it from collapsing. Economists have long noticed that crises repeat with striking regularity. There are short cycles, lasting 7 to 10 years, and long conjunctive waves, lasting 40 to 60 years. Each wave is tied to a technological revolution. Today, we're likely at the end of the digital wave and on the verge of a new one, driven by biotechnology and green energy. So why does the economy move in circles? Because human psychology doesn't change. In times of growth, people get greedy, invest recklessly, and create bubbles. When the bubbles burst, panic sets in, followed by recession. Then the cycle starts all over again. In this sense, crises aren't catastrophes, but a natural part of the cycle. They're painful, but also cleansing. The real problem is that society reacts each time as if the crisis were a complete surprise, when in fact, it's built into the system itself. Empires rise and empires fall. That's been the rhythm of history for thousands of years. Take Rome. It started as a small republic, grew into the greatest empire of the ancient world, and then slowly collapsed under its own weight. Corruption, economic problems, endless wars, and invasions chipped away until the empire crumbled. In China, historians talk about the dynastic cycle. A new dynasty comes to power, brings reform and prosperity, then over time grows corrupt, faces rebellions, and collapses. A new dynasty rises, and the cycle repeats. This went on for centuries. Even today, the cycle isn't gone. The United States is often compared to Rome, an unmatched superpower, but one that's now facing internal division, inequality, and debt. Europe, Russia, China, all are somewhere in their own cycle of rise, peak, or decline. Researchers who studied hundreds of empires found that their average lifespan is around 250 years. That's it. After that, they either collapse or transform into something new. The pattern is shockingly consistent. Of course, history doesn't copy itself exactly. America is not Rome. China today isn't the Ming Dynasty. But the rhyme is there. Power concentrates, expands, stagnates, and eventually resets. So the real question is, which phase of the cycle are we in right now? So why does history keep repeating itself? Not because the universe is cursed, but because people don't change. Human nature, ambition, greed, fear, and hope creates the same dynamics over and over again. Nations compete for power. Economies boom and crash. Viruses spread. Civilizations rise and fall. Each cycle feels like a new crisis. But if you look back, it's just another turn of the wheel. We tell ourselves, never again. Never another world war. Never another deadly pandemic. Never another financial collapse. But history shows never again usually means until next time. Yet there's also hope. Every cycle leaves us stronger. Wars end, and peace brings progress. Pandemics devastate, but they also push medicine forward. Crashes hurt, but they fuel innovation. History doesn't just repeat, it rhymes, and each rhyme comes with new opportunities. The real question is, can we break free from the cycle? Can we learn enough from the past to avoid repeating the worst parts of it? Or are we doomed to keep spinning on history's wheel forever? That's up to us. If you found this video interesting, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it. Let's keep exploring history's patterns together.